He thought the most dangerous thing he'd face that night was a missed bedtime story, until he saw the flames and the woman chained inside them. The dense, clinging fog wrapped the coastline road in an opaque shroud as Nolan Reyes navigated his way home. The air was thick with the smell of salt and damp earth, making visibility minimal. It had been a marathon of a day, culminating in a late investor meeting that had finally secured the crucial funding. As CEO of his burgeoning sustainable AI startup, Nolan knew this deal was a game-changer, the key to taking their innovative technology onto the global stage. Yet the weight of the achievement felt secondary to the persistent pull in his chest, the need to be home. All he truly desired was to arrive before his daughter Ava drifted off to sleep, to fulfill their cherished ritual of tucking her in and reading a chapter from her current favorite storybook. The thought of her small hand in his, her sleepy sigh, was the only motivation he needed through the exhausting drive. Suddenly, a slight thinning in the fog offered a brief, terrifying glimpse of the road ahead. What he saw made his heart seize in his chest and sent a cold wave of dread through him. Flames, angry orange and red tendrils, danced against the gray backdrop of the fog rising from the edge of the dense forest that bordered the road. A car was there, or what was left of one, engulfed in fire and belching thick, acrid smoke. Instinct took over. Nolan's foot slammed down on the brake pedal with urgent force. The tires shrieked in protest, tearing at the asphalt as his car skidded to a halt just short of the inferno. He didn't hesitate. Tearing his seatbelt off, he threw open the door. The sudden rush of cold, damp air, a stark contrast to the heat he knew was radiating from the wreckage. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic drum against the rising roar of the flames. The fire was a living thing, hungry and wild, licking its way up the nearby branches and fallen leaves, painting the fog-choked scene in a terrifying, hellish glow. Then, cutting through the roar and crackle, he heard it. A sound so faint he almost dismissed it as the fire's voice, but distinct nonetheless. A scream, muffled, desperate, laced with a terror that mirrored the scene before him. Without a second thought for his own safety, driven solely by that desperate sound, Nolan sprinted toward the inferno. He pulled his coat up to shield his face from the rapidly intensifying heat, the fabric offering only minimal protection. As he drew closer, the heat became a physical pressure, pushing against him, making his skin prickle and his lungs tighten. The front end of the vehicle was a mass of twisted, burning metal, entirely consumed by the fire. But as he circled around the side, he saw it. The rear section was still relatively intact, shielded for now from the worst of the flames. And inside, through the smoke-smeared glass of the back window, he saw her, a woman, trapped, bound and chained to the chassis of the burning car. Adrenaline surged, overriding the pain and heat. Remembering the small emergency hammer kept in his trunk, he ran back to his car, grabbed it, and returned in seconds that felt like hours. He swung the hammer with all his might against the rear window. Glass shattered inward. A sharp pain shot up his arm. A jagged shard had sliced his forearm, but he barely registered it. Blood dripped onto the hot metal as he dropped the hammer and frantically began prying at the mangled door. He wrenched and pulled, his muscles straining, ignoring the searing heat that blistered his hands, until the door finally buckled open. Then he tore at the heavy chains binding the woman to the seat. The metal felt impossibly cold against his burning skin, but he pulled and twisted with desperate strength until, finally, with a grating screech, the chains snapped loose. Just as he managed to pull her limp form free, dragging her away from the burning wreckage, the front end of the car exploded. The roar was deafening, a violent burst of fire and force that knocked them both backward. They tumbled onto the damp grass at the edge of the forest, coughing and gasping for air, but alive. Shaking, smoke stinging his eyes, Nolan stared down at the woman lying unconscious in his arms. Her face was streaked with soot, bruised and scraped, a stark mask of trauma. Raw, angry abrasions marked her wrists where the chains had bitten into her skin. Who was this woman, he wondered, the question a chilling whisper in his mind. And who could have wanted her dead, trapped in that fiery cage? Nolan carried the woman carefully to his home. A sleek, modern structure perched precariously on the cliffs overlooking the vast, ever-changing expanse of the Pacific Ocean. It was a place designed for peace and solitude, a haven of glass and steel that seemed to float above the crashing waves below. In the immediate aftermath of the terrifying rescue, it was the only place that felt safe enough, isolated from the world and the unknown dangers that had led her to that burning car. He gently laid her down in the guest room, its large windows offering a panoramic view of the endless horizon. She remained deep in unconsciousness for several hours, her breathing shallow, her body still. Nolan didn't call the police immediately. Instead, he contacted a private physician he trusted implicitly, explaining the harrowing circumstances of the rescue in carefully chosen words. "No police yet," he insisted, his voice firm. "She's been through something horrific. She needs to wake up feeling safe, not interrogated." The doctor, a discreet and experienced man, arrived swiftly. He conducted a thorough examination, his face growing more somber with each finding. He treated her injuries with practiced efficiency, cleaning the cuts, bandaging the burns, noting the deep bruises and the raw marks on her wrists. As he worked, he spoke softly to Nolan, confirming his fears. "She shows signs of severe malnourishment and significant physical and psychological trauma," he said, his voice low. "She's been through hell, Nolan. Mentally and physically." He administered fluids and a mild sedative to help her rest. It was late afternoon when she finally stirred, her eyelids fluttering before slowly opening. Her eyes, a startling shade of green beneath the soot and bruises, were dazed, unfocused, and filled with a profound raw fear that went deeper than the surface. Nolan sat beside the bed, his presence calm and reassuring. "You're safe now," he told her gently, his voice soft. "You're at my home." She blinked slowly, trying to take in her surroundings, the unfamiliar room, his face. Her voice was a fragile whisper, barely audible. "I don't know who I am." Nolan's heart ached for her. "You don't remember anything?" he asked, his tone compassionate. She shook her head weakly, a gesture of profound loss. Her gaze drifted towards the window, the bright sunlight on the ocean seemingly too much to comprehend. At that moment, Nolan's daughter, Ava, appeared quietly in the doorway of the guest room. Only 7 years old, Ava possessed a surprising sensitivity, a childlike intuition that seemed to sense the gravity of the situation unfolding in their usually peaceful home. She carried something carefully in her small hands, a handmade paper crown crafted with glitter glue and brightly colored paper, slightly crooked but full of earnest effort. She approached the bed shyly, her voice soft, barely above a whisper. "I made this for her," she said, holding out the crown. "She's Princess Fire because she came from fire." Nolan looked from Ava to the woman, a wave of emotion washing over him. Despite the physical toll the ordeal had taken on her, despite her brokenness and confusion, there was something in the way she held herself, even now, lying injured in a stranger's bed, that struck him as inherently regal, unyielding. The name, born from a child's innocent perception, felt strangely fitting. From that moment on in their home, she was known as Princess Fire, and although she had no name, no memory of her past, the fire that had almost consumed her had not, it seemed, extinguished her spirit entirely. It had forged something new, something resilient in its wake. In the quiet weeks that followed, Princess Fire began the slow, arduous process of healing. The physical wounds closed, the angry bruises on her skin faded to mottled yellows and greens, and the burns on her hands gradually scabbed over and began to heal. The nourishment and rest Nolan provided slowly brought a healthier color back to her face. But emotionally, she remained trapped in a deep, disorienting darkness. Her past was a locked room, accessible only through terrifying, fragmented flashbacks that came in unpredictable waves. The echo of a man's harsh voice, the chilling sound of metal chains, the cold, suffocating sensation of being in the back of a moving van. These shards of memory offered no context, only raw terror. Nolan understood that pressure would be counterproductive. He encouraged her gently, letting her know he was there to listen if she wanted to talk, but he never pushed. His focus was on building a foundation of trust, creating a safe space where she could slowly, at her own pace, begin to emerge. He shared simple moments with her, grounding her in the present. He took her to the beach at sunrise, the vastness of the ocean a soothing contrast to the confinement of her memories. He let her feed Ava's fluffy pet rabbit, the gentle interaction a small connection to innocence and life. He shared stories of his late wife Sarah, talking about their life together, her strength, her battle with cancer 2 years prior. In these quiet shared moments, a walk on the beach, a shared meal, a simple conversation, something subtle began to shift within her. The rigid tension in her shoulders lessened, the fear in her eyes occasionally softened. One night, as the rhythmic crash of waves against the rocks below provided a natural calming soundtrack, she finally broke her silence. They were sitting on the deck, wrapped in blankets, watching the moonlight over the water. "I remember a white dress," she whispered, her voice fragile but steady. "A wedding, or something like it, but I didn't want it. I didn't choose it." Her gaze was fixed on the horizon, lost in a memory she couldn't fully grasp. Nolan sat beside her, a silent, patient presence, his stillness an anchor for her drifting thoughts. More fragments surfaced, painful and chilling. There were others, she continued, her voice growing stronger, tinged with a rising horror. Girls, so many others, taken, sold. The word hung in the air, heavy and sickening. They called me a bride, she said, a bitter laugh escaping her lips, but it wasn't a wedding, it was slavery. Tears began to slip silently down her face, tracing clean paths through the fading bruises. Nolan reached out and gently took her hand, his grip firm and reassuring. You're not theirs anymore, he said, his voice filled with conviction. You're free now. But she shook her head slowly, her eyes burning with a newfound fire that had nothing to do with the accident. Not until they're stopped, she said, her voice hard, determined. Not until the others are free too. From that night on, the transformation was complete. She was no longer just a survivor, defined by what had happened to her. She was a warrior, fueled by the injustices she remembered and driven by an unyielding resolve to fight back. Armed with a purpose and Nolan's unwavering support, Princess Fire began to actively piece together the fragments of her past. Nolan, leveraging his extensive network and resources, brought in a highly skilled private security consultant, a former law enforcement officer with experience in complex investigations. Together, they became a formidable team, delving into the shadows. They visited women's shelters, hoping to find any record or memory of her or others like her. They discreetly inquired at hospitals, searching for trauma cases matching her description from the time around her rescue. They meticulously reviewed the fragmented images that surfaced in her nightmares, trying to find tangible clues. A distinctive tattoo on a captor's arm, the layout of a building, the chilling coldness of a specific room. One recurring image became a focal point. A warehouse near the harbor, its details hazy but persistent. And then a name emerged from the depths of her subconscious, whispered during a particularly vivid flashback: Echelon. Echelon was more than just a name. It was the key that began to unlock the terrifying truth. Investigation revealed it was a sophisticated human trafficking syndicate, operating under the guise of a legitimate, high-end luxury matchmaking service. They preyed on vulnerable women, luring them with false promises before trapping them in a brutal world of exploitation. They operated with chilling efficiency, hiding in plain sight, using shell corporations and complex financial maneuvers to launder not just money, but human lives, treating them as mere currency in their vile trade. The harbor warehouse fit the pattern, a likely point of entry or holding facility. The investigation was intense, consuming Nolan and Princess Fire, drawing them deeper into a dangerous world. One afternoon, as Nolan sat in his study, reviewing complex financial data linked to Echelon's tangled web of shell corporations, the dry numbers a stark contrast to the horrific reality they represented. A sudden jarring sound shattered the tranquility of the cliffside home. It was the shrill, tearing sound of the front gate being breached, followed almost immediately by Ava's piercing scream from the living room. Panic seized Nolan. A black SUV, nondescript and menacing, had breached the perimeter security. Gunfire erupted, sharp cracks echoing through the house. Chaos. Nolan reacted instantly, grabbing Ava, pulling her down and sheltering her behind the sturdy kitchen island. His heart hammered against his ribs, a primal urge to protect his daughter overwhelming everything else. From the corner of his eye he saw movement. Princess Fire emerged from the hallway, not running for cover as instinct might dictate, but moving with a focused intensity. She wasn't fleeing, she was fighting. Without hesitation, she grabbed a heavy lamp from a nearby table and hurled it with surprising force at the first intruder who burst through the doorway, buying Nolan precious seconds. It was just enough time for him to scramble to the wall panel and hit the panic button, sending a silent alarm to his private security detail. Security arrived within minutes, sirens wailing in the distance, their rapid response forcing the attackers to abandon their assault and flee in the black SUV. But they didn't leave without a message. One of the men, before he retreated, had slipped into a bathroom off the main living area. On the large vanity mirror, scrawled in vivid red lipstick, was a chilling, possessive declaration: "She belongs to us." The words were a stark reminder that even in the safety of Nolan's home they were not truly free from the shadows of Echelon. The attack on Nolan's home was a brutal confirmation of their danger, a stark reminder that Echelon would stop at nothing to reclaim what they considered their property. Princess Fire could have easily fled again. She could have disappeared, vanished into the anonymity of the world, seeking refuge somewhere they couldn't find her. But she didn't. The attack hadn't broken her. It had solidified her resolve. "They want me back because I know too much," she told Nolan later that night, her voice steady despite the lingering tension in the air. Her eyes, still bearing the weight of her past, now burned with a clear, unwavering purpose. "That means," she concluded, "I'm their threat. She didn't just survive, she intended to strike back, and she had a plan." It was audacious, terrifying, and utterly her own. She would go back to them. Not as a captive, but undercover. She would pretend to have been shaken by the attack, willing to accept their offer of protection or reintegration into their twisted world. She would be wired, every word, every interaction captured. The FBI, now officially involved thanks to Nolan's high-level contacts and the undeniable evidence of Echelon's activities, would be listening in, ready to move. Nolan's face paled at the sheer danger of it. "You could die," he said, his voice tight with fear, the thought of losing her after finding her almost unbearable. Her gaze met his, steady and resolute. "I already almost did," she replied, a ghost of a smile touching her lips. The fire she had survived had forged an unshakable courage within her. "If we don't do this," she added, her voice dropping slightly, "more girls will. They'll be taken, sold, forgotten." The weight of those words hung in the air, a silent, powerful argument against his fear. Reluctantly, agonizingly, Nolan agreed. He couldn't deny the logic of her plan or the depth of her conviction. He dedicated himself to preparing her as best he could. He spent hours training her in self-defense, honing the instincts she had already demonstrated during the attack. He secured a sophisticated tracker, small enough to be hidden but powerful enough to pinpoint her location at all times. He went over every detail of the plan with the FBI agents assigned to the case. Ava, sensing the seriousness but not fully grasping the danger, approached Princess Fire the night before the mission. She gave her a fierce hug and whispered, "Be brave, Princess Fire." Her simple words were a balm and a promise. The night of the mission arrived, thick with tension. Princess Fire, transformed by a simple yet elegant gown of the type they would have once forced upon her, stood ready. She had walked through fire once to escape. Now she was stepping back into the lion's den, a warrior disguised as a willing victim, carrying the weight of countless others on her shoulders. The warehouse stood near the docks, a hulking, anonymous structure against the night sky. It was just as she had remembered from the shards of her nightmares and the earlier investigation. Cold, clinical, its air heavy with unspoken horrors. Every shadow seemed to hold a ghost from her past, the echoes of terrified whispers and the clinking of chains. He was waiting for her. Darius Lang, the man whose face she had seen in her flashbacks, the man who had chained her to that burning car. He greeted her with a smile that didn't reach his eyes, a chilling mask of false cordiality. "You've come home," he said, extending a hand, his tone a possessive purr. She forced a smile in return, channeling every ounce of her newfound strength into playing the part. Her voice was carefully neutral, echoing the vulnerability they expected. "I've missed you," she lied, the words tasting like ash on her tongue. But inside, her heart hammered against her ribs like a trapped bird. Every second counted. Every word she spoke had to be perfect, believable, while also relaying crucial information to the FBI agents listening in outside. Darius, seemingly satisfied with her compliance, led her deeper into the warehouse. He took her to a room stark and sterile where new victims were being processed. Young women, eyes wide with fear and confusion, their fates about to be sealed. The sight was a physical blow, a stark reminder of why she was there. She hid her horror behind a carefully constructed facade, keeping her expression neutral as she spoke into the hidden microphone concealed in her clothing. "They're here," she whispered, her voice low and clear. 7 girls, ages 15 to 20. They're being processed now." Outside, the FBI agents, positioned strategically around the warehouse perimeter, received the confirmation they needed. The clock was ticking. Darius turned back to her, his smile fading, a flicker of suspicion entering his eyes. He studied her face, his gaze unnervingly sharp. "Your eyes, they look different now," he observed, a note of unease in his voice. The mask was slipping. She met his gaze directly, no longer needing to pretend. A cold, hard smile touched her lips, a reflection of the fire she carried within. "Because I've seen the fire," she replied, her voice devoid of fear, filled instead with a quiet, potent power. His eyes widened in understanding, the realization dawning that she wasn't the broken captive he expected. He lunged for her, his earlier pretense dissolving into raw fury. Chaos erupted. Gunshots rang out from outside as the FBI initiated their raid, breaching the warehouse doors. Amidst the sudden, violent chaos that erupted within the warehouse, a figure moved against the tide of trained agents. Nolan, who had defied explicit orders from the FBI to stay behind at the command center. The agonizing suspense and the chilling sound of her scream through the comms having become unbearable, had rushed to the scene. Driven by a desperate need to ensure her safety, he burst into the building, the sounds of gunfire and shouting echoing around him. He found her in a brutal struggle. She was grappling with Darius Lang, the man who had embodied her terror. Darius held a glinting blade to her throat, his face contorted in a mask of rage and defeat. "Let her go," Nolan shouted, his voice raw with adrenaline and fear, drawing Darius's attention. Darius turned, his focus momentarily shifting. In that split second, Princess Fire seized her chance. With a swift, powerful movement, she kicked out, connecting with Darius's hand. The blade clattered to the concrete floor. But Darius still held a weapon, a handgun he had drawn during the initial chaos. He swung it wildly. A single gunshot echoed through the cavernous space, louder than all the others. Nolan stumbled backward, a look of shock on his face. He collapsed to the floor, a dark, rapidly expanding stain blooming on his shirt. A guttural scream tore from her throat. Seeing Nolan fall, something primal ignited within her. She tackled Darius with furious strength, wrestling with him for the gun. The struggle was brief and brutal, fueled by her rage and terror. Agents arrived seconds later, converging on Darius, subduing him and the remaining traffickers. The warehouse, once a cage of despair, was now a scene of arrests and the quiet, tearful liberation of the captives. But for Princess Fire, the world narrowed to the figure lying still on the cold floor. Nolan lay motionless, blood staining his shirt, the silence around him terrifyingly profound. Against all odds, Nolan survived. The bullet, a cruel twist of fate, had missed his heart by mere inches. A near-fatal strike that underscored the brutal reality of the world they had faced. He was rushed to the hospital, where skilled surgeons worked for hours to save him. The days that followed were a blur of critical condition, worried whispers, and the humming of medical equipment. Weeks of intensive recovery followed, a slow, arduous journey back from the brink. And through it all, Princess Fire was a constant, unwavering presence by his side. She rarely left his room, watching over him, holding his hand, her silent strength a comforting anchor in the sterile hospital environment. Ava visited too, bringing drawings and quiet smiles, sensing the deep connection between her father and the woman who had come from the fire. One afternoon, still groggy from anesthesia and pain medication, Nolan's eyes fluttered open and focused on her face. His voice was a raspy whisper. "You saved me," he murmured, the words heavy with gratitude. Her fingers tightened around his hand. A soft, knowing smile touched her lips. "You saved me first," she replied, the simple truth of it hanging between them. As he slowly regained his strength, the questions about her past resurfaced, less urgent now, but still present. In the quiet moments of his recovery, pieces began to fall into place, memories surfacing more clearly, less fragmented. And finally, she spoke her real name. "Illyra," she said, a name foreign and familiar on her tongue. She had been taken at 16, a young girl with a future stolen. Sold across borders, passed from one buyer to another, renamed by each one as if she were property. With each new name, a layer of her identity was stripped away, until she no longer remembered the girl she had been, until she forgot who Illyra was. Now, in the stillness of Nolan's recovery room, surrounded by the quiet hum of life, she was reclaiming that name, reclaiming herself, Illyra. Months unfolded like the turning of pages in a new book. Echelon, exposed and dismantled, became a cautionary tale in the headlines. The perpetrators were brought to justice, their network shattered, and the victims, once commodities, were given a chance to reclaim their lives. Illyra testified in court, her voice clear and unshaken, recounting the horrors she had endured and witnessed, her testimony a powerful indictment of the syndicate. Nolan returned to work, the fast-paced world of tech, but he moved slower this time, more deliberate. The near-death experience, the fight for Illyra's life, and the reality of the evil they had confronted had changed his perspective. The global reach of his sustainable AI startup still mattered, but the sustainable part held a deeper, more human meaning now. One morning, the air crisp and cool, the beach lit gold by the soft glow of sunrise, Nolan stood barefoot in the sand, the gentle lapping of waves a peaceful rhythm. Ava, no longer whispering of Princess Fire but embracing Illyra, stood nearby holding a small velvet box. Nolan turned to Illyra, his heart full. "Illyra," he said, his voice warm with love and admiration. As he spoke, Ava released a handful of colorful flower petals into the breeze. a shower of natural confetti carried away by the gentle wind. "You turned fire into light," he continued, his gaze holding hers. "You faced the worst and emerged stronger. Would you be the queen to our kingdom?" He opened the velvet box, revealing a simple, elegant ring that symbolized not just a future together, but a shared journey forged in fire and resilience. Tears streamed down her face, tears of joy and overwhelming love. "Only if Ava makes my crown," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. And Ava did. With glitter and paper and boundless love, she crafted a new crown, a symbol of their unique family. They married on that very beach, the ocean stretching out before them, a symbol of endless possibilities. They were surrounded by the people who had supported them, survivors who had found their own paths to healing, friends who had stood by them, and the endless rhythmic waves, a constant reminder of the powerful forces they had weathered together. From the ashes of their individual pasts, Alira and Nolan built more than just a home. They built a refuge, a testament to resilience and the power of second chances. Their cliffside house, once a private sanctuary, expanded its purpose, becoming a safe house for rescued girls, a place where they could find healing, support, and a path towards reclaiming their own lives. Alira, with her unique understanding of their trauma, became a beacon of hope and guidance. Nolan leveraged his resources and expertise to establish a tech fund dedicated to trafficking prevention, developing innovative technologies and supporting organizations working to combat modern-day slavery. Their combined efforts created a powerful force for change, dismantling more networks and saving more lives. And every night, in their warm, loving home, Nolan read Ava her favorite book. It was still a story of adventure and bravery. But now, nestled amongst the familiar pages was a new addition. The story of Princess Fire. It was a tale of a woman who emerged from flames, faced darkness, and found her strength. Alira was no longer defined by her past as a victim. She was a survivor, yes, but also a queen in her own right, a co-creator of a kingdom built on love, healing, and action. She was a beacon for others still lost in the dark, a living testament that even from the deepest shadows light can emerge. And somewhere in the distance, on the horizon where the ocean met the sky, flames still flickered, not the destructive fires of the past, but the enduring, defiant fire of hope, illuminating the path towards a future where every soul had the chance for a second chance. If this story of survival, love, and the fight for justice moved you, subscribe now for more powerful tales of resilience and redemption. Turn on notifications so you never miss the next chapter in stories that prove even in the darkest moments, the fire of hope continues to burn bright. The fire continues.